Hey there, welcome to another episode of Mike's Collection. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is the top 15 action figures of 2015. Now that might seem like an odd thing to be talking about, seeing as it is July 2022 as I sit down to do this video. But the reason I'm doing it, I guess, is just to kind of break up the monotony of this channel a little bit. I usually just do videos and I've been showing you all my new stuff. I've had so much new stuff coming in that it's just like one episode after the other where I'm like, this is what I got this week, this is what I got last week. And I do like to occasionally do, best of lists. Like these are my favorite G.I. Joes from the 2000s and things like that. And I haven't had a chance to do one of those in a while. And since I started this YouTube channel, I think 3 years ago, I always do a best of list at the end of the year. And the thing is, I started talking about toys way back in 2012. I originally started a blog called Mike's Collection, which you can still go find. It's mikescollection.wordpress.com, so go check it out. I've got hundreds of written toy reviews on there. But so I started that in 2012, and every year I would do a best of list. And, around 2019, that's when I kind of made the switch from blogging to YouTube. But anyway, I thought, since I already have those lists compiled for 2012 right up to 2018, that I would make videos and share my lists with you. So I've previously posted my best of 2012, 2013, and 2014. But even those I did quite some time ago. I think when I did my best of 2014 video, I posted that nearly 2 years ago. So it's been a while since I went back and revisited one of those old lists. So I thought, why not? Let's do that again today. So the next one up is my top 15 of 2015. Now, I'm not changing my list. This is the list that I published in 2015, so I'm not altering it. But one of the things that's kind of fun about going back to look at these lists is, kind of having hindsight. And do I feel the same? Would the same toys have made this list? Now, in preparation for doing this video, I did kind of look at what other figures I got in 2015 that didn't make the list. Now, unfortunately, I don't know every figure that I got in 2015. I don't necessarily keep a database like that. But fortunately, there are lots of websites out there like yojo.com or itsalltrue.net that have some very good lists that break down toys by release. So I was able to go back and remind myself what G.I. Joes came out in 2015, and I could say, like, oh, is there any good ones that I kind of missed? So I was able to find lists for Star Wars Black Series, Masters of the Universe, G.I. Joe, Transformers, like some of the big lines. But I couldn't tell you every toy I bought in 2015. Another reason I'm not going to alter this is, for example, when I looked at the Star Wars Black Series list of 2015 releases, I saw that the Wampa was on there. And I love Star Wars monsters. I absolutely loved the Wampa when I was a kid, and I was super stoked to get this Black Series Wampa. However, I didn't get it right away. I'm not sure when I got it, but I know I got it at a discount from GameStop here in Canada. I think it was originally a Target exclusive, which we don't have in Canada. So I remember I wanted this when it came out. It didn't come out. I got it later at a discount from GameStop. So that leads me to believe I probably ended up purchasing this in 2016, which is why it wouldn't have qualified for my list back in 2015, because I didn't have it. So my only rules for the list are that I had to have actually purchased the figure. I'm not I'm not doing a list of every figure that was released in 2015 because I have no idea how good some of those figures are. There was many figures released. I'm just kind of looking at the ones that I acquired and that were released in that calendar year. So, besides the Wampa, there were some other cool ones that I saw when I was doing my little bit of research, but there was nothing that really stood out to me thinking like, oh, how could I not put that on this list? I think my list still stands up pretty well. So I guess we'll just dive right into it and take a look at number 15. So in the number 15 spot, I've got Cardenas from the Goth Atropolis line from Four Horsemen Studios. Now, if you don't know what any of that stuff means, the Four Horsemen were a group of sculptors that started off working for McFarlane Toys in the 90s, and then they branched off and started their own studio. They were hired out by companies like Mattel to work on the Masters of the Universe Classics line. But after doing that for a while, they decided to start their own original line of toys. The first original line they put out was called Seventh Kingdom, and it featured a bunch of anthropomorphic animal warriors. There was like cow guys and hippo guys and elephant guys and animal, like cat women, like leopards and panthers and stuff. And they were very cool. Like, they were really nicely sculpted figures. I didn't get any of those Seventh Kingdom figures initially, partly because I didn't know about them when they first launched. And they were kind of expensive, and you couldn't buy them at toy stores or even comic book shops. You kind of had to buy them directly from the Four Horsemen. That was a bit of a nuisance. So I didn't get on board with that. But then they eventually moved on to Gothotropolis, which is what this figure is from. And then from here, they moved on to Mythic Legions, which is the toy line that they're most well known for now. And they've been making Mythic Legions figures for several years now. But before Mythic Legions, we had Gothotropolis. And what that line consisted of was all these bird warriors. So it was kind of a continuation of what they had been doing with Seventh Kingdom. And you see here, it's some really nice sculpting on these guys. So this guy here, Cardinus, is obviously a cardinal. Like, really nice sculpting in the armor. You see all these little trinkets he's got on his belt. Very cool. Now, they did a whole series of these bird guys. Initially, it was a Kickstarter, and, there was like, I don't know, a half dozen or so, maybe 8 or 10 birds to choose from. And then they went on and did a series 2 and added a bunch more. And they were all really cool, but they were really expensive. And when I say really expensive, it was in line with what you buy now from Mythic Legions and stuff. But they still are kind of expensive figures. In Canada, these figures would have run me probably about $55 a pop. But then you add on the shipping, and it does get pricey. So when it came to these Gothotropolis figures, I only ordered 2. Like, they were all great, and most of them shared the same parts. I think pretty much from the neck down, they were all the same, just painted different. It was just a matter of choosing, I guess, what your favorite bird was. Now, I don't really have any particular love for cardinals. I don't really know why I picked Cardinus, other than I just thought his whole presentation was really nice. I like the black and gold armor on the red feathers. I thought was very striking. I like that he has this little crest. It looked really cool. I like this guy a lot. The only other guy I bought from the line, and he could have just as easily made the list as well, was Eagleus. So you see here with Eagleus, he's got the same armor, except he's very, USA. He came with this one extra piece of a cloth cape with the American flag with kind of an eagle head on it. But otherwise, he's just got the same armor as Cardinus. So I really like this guy too. Why did Cardinus make the list? Again, I think I just like the red and the black and the gold. But would he still make the list now? Yeah, probably. I think what the Four Horsemen are doing with Mythic Legions nowadays is even better than what we got here with Gothotropolis. But at the time, I thought these guys were great, and they were an original lineup, which is really cool. They kind of reminded me of Battle Beasts, which was one of my favorite toy lines from the 80s, which consisted of anthropomorphic animal warriors in armor. So it's kind of a slight, homage to them, I guess. Now, sadly, I'm not sure how long after 2015 I did this, but these figures, like all these kind of boutique figures, I guess you would order, Mythic Legions, Action Force, they can be a little delicate, and it's often recommended that you warm the joints with a hairdryer or warm water before you pose them. And I think I was a little overzealous with Cardinus, and his leg broke off. And it's not something I've tried to glue it, but you can see he's got these skinny little bird legs, great detail on the feet. But yeah, it broke right here, and I can't glue it right now. I've got him wrapped in tape, but you can see how loose that leg is. It barely holds him. So that kind of sucks. I think if I had broken him before I had made my list, I probably would have put Eagleus on the list in place of him, just because this kind of holds him back. It makes it hard for me to pose him or even to have him stand up properly. So yeah, that's a huge bummer that he's broken. But anyway, he's still an awesome looking figure. So that's Cardinus at number 15. At number 14, I had First Aid, and this is one of the Transformers Combiner Wars figures from Hasbro. Now, there was like Combiner Wars was the series of Transformers that was out at the time. And if you're familiar with Transformers Combiners, what those are big robots that are made up of a bunch of smaller robots. So usually there's one larger robot that kind of forms the torso and the head, and then there's 4 smaller robots that can form the various limbs. So First Aid here is one of the Protectobots, and he forms the Combiner Defensor. And he was always one of my favorite Combiners when I was a kid. And First Aid was one of my favorite Transformer figures. However, like a lot of vintage Transformers, the vintage toy didn't really live up to the character in my imagination. Like, he was very squatty, he was kind of small, he didn't have much articulation. But I really just loved that character. And I couldn't even really tell you why. I think in part it was the head design. I really liked the face of First Aid. You know, like, I don't remember him being particularly well developed in the cartoon or the comic books or anything. I just really gravitated towards him. He transforms into an ambulance. And yeah, it was just nice to get an update on one of my favorite Transformers. Now, that particular year, 2015, there was a lot of different combiners released that year. Like, we had the Protectobots. We also had the Stunticons that formed Menasor. So here is like one of those guys. We had the Aerial Bots that formed Superion. We had the Combaticons that formed Bruticus. Here's one of my Combaticons. So you see, these guys shared a lot of the same build. Like, you'll notice they have this piece here. This is the piece that flips out and plugs in to make them an arm or a leg or whatever. So you can see that there on all these pieces. You have to move this here, I think. And then, whoops, and then there you see his plug. So they're all kind of constructed pretty similarly. So objectively, there's nothing about First Aid that makes him better than, say, Swindle here or any of the other combiners. I think they're all pretty quality figures. Like, they look like the characters are supposed to look like. They move pretty well. Like, for the first time ever, First Aid has elbows and he has knees, and you can actually pose him in dynamic positions. And he's got an axe, which is kind of cool. Yeah, I just think he's great. I've just always loved this character, and I was just super happy to have an update of him. So, yeah, I don't know if he would make anybody else's best of list for 2015, but for me, it's about a personal attachment to the character. And yeah, I think this is a pretty great update. So there you go. That's First Aid at number 14. In the number 13 spot, I have the Great White Shark, or Jaws, or Bruce, if you prefer. But anyway, it's the shark from the movie Jaws. This is a reaction figure. So those are the... like, most reaction figures are kind of modeled after the old Kenner Star Wars figures. So they have 5 points of articulation. When this figure came out, they actually made the 3 human characters in the reaction style format. So you can see here, you can get Quint, Hooper, and Brody, which I got all of those guys as well. And then I also got the shark. And yeah, I absolutely love Jaws. It is one of the best movies ever made. It holds up brilliantly, I think. I still think the shark in Jaws is way scarier than any shark we've gotten in any movie since, no matter how far the technology has come. I think Jaws is just way scarier. It's Steven Spielberg's whole style of, you know, not really showing you the shark so much, and a lot of the fear comes from your imagination. But when that shark shows up, I still think he looks awesome. So anyway, I've loved that movie forever, and I was so stoked to get action figures of this guy from Funko. And not only did they make the reaction figures, but they also made Funko Pops. So I got Funko Pops of both the shark and the human characters as well. I did actually open this guy up. He is not sealed. I think you can probably see I taped the packaging back up because once I opened him, it was kind of hard to display him. He's kind of large, and so I ultimately decided to just put him back in the box, and I just pinned him up on my wall, and he makes a great display piece. And I suppose I could open him up again for this video, but I just didn't bother. You get the idea. He's a shark. He doesn't move much. His jaw opens and closes. He came with a little oxygen tank to put into his mouth, in which he, spoiler alert, that's how he's killed at the end of the movie. They shoot the oxygen tank and blow him up. But, you know, what more do you need? Like, he doesn't really need any additional articulation. Like, I suppose you could make his fins flap or his tail turn. but it's really not necessary. As long as his mouth opens and closes, that's all you need. And I think he looks great. Like a lot of reaction figures, they have kind of soft sculpts, and they don't really look like the humans that they're supposed to represent. But with the shark here, I think he looks perfect. Like, even if they were trying to make a super photorealistic, Marvel Legends style Jaws the shark, I don't know if he would look much better than this. So, despite the fact that he's modeled after the kind of simple Kenner style figures, I think he comes out amazing. I love this figure, and that's why he's number 13. In my number 12 spot, I have Snake Armor He-Man from Mattel's Master of the Universe Classics line. Now, from the toys I've looked at so far, like Cardinus and First Aid, I think they were on the list where they belong. But He-Man here, I think if I were to redo this list, he would be up higher. Because I know I kind of cheat with these lists every year. I get so many great figures. I probably should just do a top 10 like a normal person. But I always kind of cheat. I did the top 15 of 2015. Last year I did the top 21 of 2021. So I keep making my list grow so I can put more figures on my list. But if I was forced to do a top 10 of 2015, I feel this He-Man figure should be on here. So this guy here is based on one of the 2002 He-Man designs. So if you're not familiar with all of that, so basically, Masters of the Universe and He-Man, the figures first came out in the early 80s. And in around 2009, 2010, Mattel revisited them with a line they called Masters of the Universe Classics, which were these kind of like 6-7 inch style figures. They were more articulated, more detailed, sculpted by the Four Horsemen, and just amazing figures. I really love this line. And even though Mattel is doing some really nice Masters of the Universe figures now with their Origins line and their Revelation line, I don't think they'll ever top what they did with their Classics line. But anyway, when they did their first couple of He-Man figures that was kind of modeled after that 80s He-Man design, I really wasn't that impressed with the look of it. They kind of changed the face up, made him a little soft looking, and I just didn't really care for it. But to be perfectly honest, even though I love Masters of the Universe, I never particularly loved He-Man anyway. He was always kind of my least favorite character. I much preferred the monsters and the robots and that sort of stuff. However, in 2002... So, a few years before Masters of the Universe Classics came out, there was a reboot of Masters of the Universe, a new cartoon, a new toy line, and it was kind of like Japanese anime inspired. The designs were a lot more dynamic. Characters like He-Man, I think, looked a lot younger. And maybe some fans didn't like it, but I absolutely loved it. I loved those designs. For the first time ever, I thought He-Man looked cool. I actually liked He-Man. So he started off in Season 1 with his usual kind of just loincloth barbarian look. But by Season 2, he was fighting the Snake Men, and they gave him this new design, the Snake Armor. Now, I don't know how effective this armor would be against snake bites, because he's still half naked here, but it's a cool look. And so they made a toy of this in 2002 or 2003 or whatever. And when the Classics line kind of took over, they often didn't touch on the 2000 era. They mostly stuck with the kind of vintage 80s line and tried to remake all those toys. So whenever they did get around to remaking one of the looks from the 2002 series, I was always really excited about it. And this is my favorite version of He-Man in the Classics line. Like, he's got this kind of more, I guess you could call it anime-inspired hair, the way it's all layered like that. But I really like this face sculpt. I really like the armor. I like all the different colors. I like this weird claw thing he has on his armor. I like the 2002 Power Sword. I think that's way more interesting than the classic Power Sword. Just everything about this is great. I love this figure from, when I first got it, and that hasn't changed at all in all these years. I still think it's awesome. And so, yeah, I definitely think this would probably be in my top 10 if I were to do this list now. So before we crack into my top 10, let's take a look at my number 11 ranked figure. And this here is Wonder Woman from DC Direct. And it is part of their line inspired by the artwork of Jaylee. So, Jaylee, I think he's a really amazing artist who's done work for pretty much all the major comic book companies. He's got a really unique, kind of dark style. And he seemed like kind of an unlikely choice. for DC Direct to select him to do a line of toys based on his artwork, just because it is so stylized, and I didn't know how well it would translate. But the figures they produced looked really great. And I think there were 4 of them in total, but the only one that I was really interested in was their Superman. And so I did buy the Jaylee Superman, and I really liked it. However, I went to my comic shop one day with no intention of getting the Jaylee Wonder Woman, and I saw it, and I just kind of fell in love with it and had to pick it up. And when the time came to do my list, yeah, Wonder Woman actually beat out Superman. So I think this is a fantastic figure. And the main reason I didn't want it, like, I thought it looked good even when I first saw it, you know, advertised in magazines and stuff, but I thought, no, you know what? I'm going to get the Superman, but I don't need a Wonder Woman because I already have this Wonder Woman figure from DC Direct, and I always thought this was basically the perfect Wonder Woman figure. I love the look of it. It's based off the artwork of Terry Dodson, who is, again, one of my favorite artists. He draws beautiful women, and I thought this figure just really captured classic Wonder Woman. You know, really solid figure. And once I got this, I just never thought I would ever need to replace her. But again, I saw that figure and I just thought, wow, she just really impressed me. Now, I haven't really looked too closely at this figure for a couple of years. She's been kind of tucked away on the back of my DC shelf. And I'm noticing something that's kind of bumming me out. Some of these DC Direct figures over time have kind of deteriorated. So again, there you see her face. I think the paint job's really nice. Like, everything about her, I think, looks really good. But I just noticed this for the first time. Her upper legs are starting to change color. They did not always look like that. And now it looks like she's got some sort of weird, I don't know, long underwear on underneath of her skirt. And now it just looks strange. So yeah, if she looked like that when I bought her, well, for one, I probably would not have bought her. And 2, that would probably keep her from getting on this list just because I think that looks kind of terrible. So that's a huge bummer. I don't know why. I would say clearly DC Direct used a different type of plastic from this point to this point. And now this stuff is changing color over time. But yeah, that's a huge bummer. But otherwise, I still think the design of this Wonder Woman is fantastic. Like this one here, I feel is the more classic Wonder Woman. This is kind of the Wonder Woman I feel like I grew up with. But this one here, she's got kind of a retro vibe to her with the little skirt. I love the big long boots with the metal like shin guards there. I just think it's really sharp. I really, really like this figure. And now I'm sad about that. But anyway, still a good figure. And still definitely list worthy. So at number 10, I've got Otachi from Pacific Rim. So this is one of the Kaiju figures. And this is an amazing figure. It's really big. It might be a little hard to tell, but like if I bring in an old like 3 3/4 inch figure here, you can really kind of see the size of Otachi. She is a very big figure. Just kind of a funny little story. I mean, I've been doing this YouTube channel for, like I said, about 3 years now. And, you know, all my videos do okay. You know, a lot of them get over 100 views. Some of them get, 200-300 views. Some of them even get over 1,000 views. I did a video a while back, like early on when I started this channel, a review of my Pacific Rim Kaiju figures. And that one video has over, like, I think 160,000 views. So people love Pacific Rim Kaiju figures. And this was produced by NECA, by the way. They did all the figures for the first movie. And then there was a different company that took over for the second Pacific Rim movie. And anyway, so that one video gets a lot of views and it gets lots of comments. And one of the most frequent comments I get is people criticizing me for constantly saying, oh yeah, Otachi's cool, he's cool. And they said, it's a she. Even to this day, I still get comments criticizing me for calling Otachi a male. Now, despite all those comments, like, I do understand Otachi had a baby in the movie. However, I don't necessarily think that makes Otachi a girl. Like, I understand what everybody's saying, but, this is like a creature from another universe. Who are we to say? If you remember the old, like, 1998 Godzilla movie, Godzilla was a male who produced asexually. So, yeah, I don't know if it's official that Otachi's a girl, But whatever, I'll try to refer to it as a her anyway to appease all those Otachi fans out there. But yeah, this is a great figure. I love the Pacific Rim figures. Like, I really liked the movie, but I liked the figures even better. I like the concept. It's kind of like the same with Godzilla. I own all the old Godzilla movies. I find some of them pretty hard to watch, but I just love the idea of Godzilla. And I think that kind of carries through with Pacific Rim. The idea of big robots fighting big monsters is the coolest concept in the world, but some of the execution, I think, in the movie didn't really work. But that's neither here nor there. Great figures, great designs, great toys, and Otachi's one of the best ones. Most of the other kaijus were kind of like bipedal, like stood up on just their two legs. This one here, he's kind of four-legged. It's a different design. He was much larger than most of the other figures in the line. He was also much more expensive. But you see here his jaw opens up and splits in that weird way. And his tongue, if you remember, his tongue came out and it was like searching around underground. You can unplug this tongue and you could attach a big long swirling tongue if you wanted to. I've got that tucked away somewhere. He also came with his little baby Otachi as an accessory. I don't have that out, but that's another cool little thing they gave him. His articulation is decent. He's got this big long scorpion tail with these claws open up, so you can kind of grip with the tail, and there are multiple articulation points on the tail. The tail comes off because there was a scene in the movie where his tail gets hacked off. And if you remember, you'll notice these things here, they look like folded up wings, and that's exactly what they are. After his tail gets hacked off in the movie, he spreads his wings and he takes off like a bat. One thing that was a huge bummer that I thought was that they released two Otachi figures. There was this one that had the folded up wings and the long tail, and then they released another version that had the big open wings, but it didn't even come with a tail, which seemed silly. I would have rather them just release one Otachi. I would have even paid an extra $20 or whatever just to give me, detachable wings. You can already detach the tail. And I was hard pressed to choose which one I liked, because obviously the winged one was really cool, but I hated that he just had this bloody stump that ended right here. I really liked this cool tail. So ultimately I opted for this version. I think he's awesome. I really love this figure. I wish they made more Pacific Rim figures, because there was lots of other creatures in the movie that we never did get figures of. And obviously there's a fan base for it, because I've got 160,000 views on that video. But yeah, amazing figure. Love this guy. Sorry, this girl. At number 9, I've got Hasbro's Kylo Ren from their Star Wars Black series. Now, I still think this is a good figure. I like the Star Wars Black series. However, that is one of the toy lines that I've kind of cooled on. I used to buy pretty much every Stormtrooper variant they put out and everything, but toys have gotten more expensive lately, and I wasn't willing to cut back on my G.I. Joes or my Transformers or other things. So Star Wars is kind of the one where I've cooled down on. And Kylo Ren is a character. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. I was going to say I cooled down on Kylo Ren, but I haven't. I still think Kylo Ren is a great character, but I have kind of cooled down on the sequel movies, because at the time of this figure came out, I would have only seen The Force Awakens. Now, I thought The Force Awakens was fun, but it was way too similar to A New Hope, in the same way Jurassic World was too similar to Jurassic Park. It just seemed like they were really playing on fans' nostalgia and just replaying a lot of the beats we were already familiar with. But I thought Kylo Ren was the breakout character of Force Awakens, and I really wanted to see what they were going to do with him in the later movies. Now, I actually really do like what they did with Kylo Ren in the later movies. I think he's kind of the one character who had an interesting arc. I think there was a lot of problems with the later two movies in the sequel trilogy, and because of that, if I were to make a list now of my top 20 or my top 15 movies of 2015, I don't know if I'd put Kylo Ren on there, just because the later movies kind of soured me on him a little bit. But going back to 2015, I was really stoked about this guy. I thought he was really cool, and I thought Adam Driver really made him interesting in the movie. And yeah, this figure's got a lot going for it. I like all the various textures. Like you see, he's got soft goods here. I don't always love soft goods on my figures, but it works here. And then he's got this layer here, which is this textured plastic, and then you lift that up, and then you see the rest of his outfit underneath. He's got this as a plastic sculpted I'll say shawl, I don't know what better word to use, that hangs over top of the soft goods. And then he's got another piece of soft goods here for his hood. And I think that looks really good. A lot of times with soft goods, the hood sits kind of goofy and not very realistic, but I really like the way this hood kind of hangs over his face. Now, I don't know if it's particularly screen accurate, but I think it looks awesome and it makes for a really cool figure. He's got his cool lightsaber and everything. Just a cool character. And who doesn't love a, black masked Star Wars villain? Just cool stuff. So at number 8, I have another Masters of the Universe Classics figures from Mattel, and this here is Calix. And like Snake Armor He-Man, this is another figure that is based on the 2002 cartoon. Calix here is not based on any vintage toy or vintage cartoon character. He is a brand new creation from the 2002 cartoon. And we really didn't get a whole lot of those in the Classics line. And I really love this guy. Like, he's a rock guy, and that's nothing very original. Like, we've seen lots of rock guys, going right back to the Thing from Fantastic Four. And yet, I think his design, as simple as it is, it looks really cool. Like, he doesn't look like just another like rock lord or whatever. They even have other rock characters in Masters of the Universe, and yet this guy still stands out on his own, and I think he's really cool. And it was just nice to get some kind of fresh blood in the Masters of the Universe line. So he barely appeared in the cartoon. If memory serves, he appeared in kind of like one flashback scene, and he basically got killed right away. But you see here, he's a member of the Evil Horde. He's got the Horde logo. All members of the Horde have like a distinct kind of crossbow. And you'll notice this thing here, he's got an axe, but he can hold it by this handle, and then it would kind of look like one of the Horde crossbows. So it's kind of a dual weapon. He's also got this stone shield here. But I think they did a really effective job with the sculpting and the paintwork to make him look like he's made of stone. So yeah, I think the premise was that in the first season of the 2002 show, He-Man fought Skeletor. The second season, he fought King Hiss and the Snake Men. And the third season, he was going to fight Hordak and the Evil Horde. And they had kind of been setting that up. And they did a little flashback where they showed the Horde coming to Eternia, and this guy here got killed. But yeah, we never got to season 3 of the show. It got canceled prematurely, so we never got a chance to see if maybe Calix would make a comeback. And we never got to see those other beloved Horde characters, really show up on screen, like Leech and Mantenna and Grizzlor. So that's too bad that we never got season 3. But yeah, really solid figure. Love this guy. Just looks super cool. And he's actually probably one of my favorite Masters of the Universe Classics figures. And that's saying something, because it was a pretty cool lineup altogether. So in the number 7 spot, we've got Frostbite. And this is one of Hasbro's G.I. Joes. Now, Hasbro wasn't really giving us much in the way of G.I. Joes at this point in time. After, the second live action movie had kind of run its course, there didn't seem to be a whole lot of interest from retailers, and Hasbro wasn't really pushing G.I. Joe, and it was kind of on life support for a few years, until it eventually went away completely for about 2 years, and it has now made a big comeback at the 6-inch scale with the G.I. Joe Classified line. But this here is still kind of one of the last figures to come out from the what we call the modern era or Generation 3 G.I. Joes. So these guys are about 4 inches tall. And so most of the figures we were getting at this point in time came from the G.I. Joe Collectors Club. So what they did is every year there would be a Joe Con, and the G.I. Joe Collectors Club would produce a box set of 15 original figures. And they would also have a figure subscription service. So you could sign up to get a G.I. Joe a month, essentially, in the mail. They also had a free subscription figure if you just joined up with the Collectors Club. You got a free figure for joining. So I actually did get quite a few G.I. Joes in 2015, but almost all of them were from the Collectors Club, which meant they were all quite expensive. A G.I. Joe at retail back then was still maybe about $15, where these guys here were probably closer to 35 or 40 a piece, and they were largely made up of reused parts. Because the Collectors Club didn't have the means that, say, Hasbro did, they mostly just kind of reused parts that existed, and every now and again they gave us, some new heads or maybe some new weapons. But for the most part, the figures were reused. So anyway, with the figure subscription service, if you paid for, they would show you 12 figures. And it didn't last the whole year. What they would do is they would send you 12 figures, and you'd get 2 figures a month for 6 months. So they would show you the 12 figures, and you had like a limited amount of time to sign up. And if you signed up, which I did for every single year, then I got some G.I. Joes in the mail. And they would promise you that if you paid for the full subscription, you would get a bonus 13th mystery figure that they would not tell you about in advance with your final shipment. So in 2015, it was the 3rd figure subscription service. And when I got the 6th and final shipment, the bonus figure was Frostbite here. Now, he might not look like anything too exciting, but the thing is, the Collectors Club was giving us a lot of kind of obscure characters, a lot of repaints, maybe later versions of characters. But for me, my love of G.I. Joe really stems from the early years of G.I. Joe. Back then, we got hardly any like redos of characters. Like there was only 2 or 3 Snake Eyes at the time. Now there's like over 100. But at the time, almost all the characters were unique. And a lot of them were still pretty military-based and realistic. And Frostbite here, he was like the 2nd G.I. Joe Arctic Trooper after Snowjob. He was the driver of the Snowcat, which was a vehicle I had as a kid, and I really liked the original Frostbite figure. And he was a character who we had not gotten in the modern line, and he seemed to be a glaring omission because he was such, like an early release from the vintage line. And those were some of the characters that Hasbro tended to tackle first. So we got all those early characters that everybody knows from the cartoon, like Shipwreck and Snake Eyes and Gung-Ho and Duke. And Frostbite should have been there, but we didn't get him. And so it was a relief that we finally got him from the Collectors Club. And they did a bang-up job. He looks stellar. So the head sculpt is from Boss Fight Studios. We'll talk more about them soon. And it's just a fantastic head sculpt. Like he's a simple-looking figure, but he looks exactly how he should. Like the body, like I said, I think it's all reused parts, and most likely is, except for the head. And they crafted this new kind of fur piece, which just plops on over top of the existing body. So this suit was probably used for like a pilot or something before. It's kind of baggy, but they found a really creative way of doing it. Rather than create a whole new torso, which probably would have been more expensive, they just created this kind of little overlay. And now it looks like he's wearing a big furry jacket, and I love it. It's simple but great. He's a character that we really needed in the line, and I'm really glad we got him before the line went away. And I think he holds up, and he would definitely still be on my list if I were to make it today. For my number 6 spot, I kind of cheated on my list here. So what you're looking at is a Marauder Task Force figure. And what those are is there's this company called Marauder's Gun Runners, and for a long time they were a website that just sold custom-made weapons for your G.I. Joe figures, so they fit in the hands of all 3 3/4 inch G.I. Joes. Because a lot of times, especially in the later years of G.I. Joe, Hasbro was making all the guns like neon green and the swords were pink, and that really annoyed some people. So it prompted the guys over at Marauder Gun Runners to create much more realistic looking little guns. And so they did that for a long time. But then in 2014, they launched a Kickstarter to do their own line of figures that were compatible with the modern style, like 4-inch G.I. Joes. And this is what we got. Now, it was a Kickstarter, and it had a bunch of different tiers and unlock goals. So I think initially it started with 3 figures. And if they made enough money to get the 3 figures, then maybe you could unlock a 4th figure and a 5th figure and so on. Anyway, this Kickstarter made a ton of money. If you want more details on this, I did a whole video on Marauder Task Force a couple of months ago, so just look for that on my channel. But for the number 6 spot, I just said Marauder Task Force figures. So this is one guy that you're looking at here. And I can't remember how many figures it ended up being in total. I think, about 15 or so, maybe even more than that. But here's just an example of some of them. So basically you can custom these guys however you want. Like they had unmasked heads. They had all kinds of different kinds of helmets, different types of vests, different types of pouches. Now I obviously prefer the guys with masks because all these guys here have masks on. I've got some of the different types of helmets here. So this is more of like an armor-plated helmet that I've got on this guy. Whereas this guy, I've got him with the helmet with the straps on it here. And you see this guy, I've just got these kind of straps on his torso. And you notice all these little holes in it. So you can plug these pouches. Every single one of these little pouches is removable on his legs, the gun holster, these things on his boots. All these pouches are removable. So you can buy little pouches and little holsters and little knife sheaths, these little grenade clips. All of this stuff you can buy separately on the website. Some of it only costs like a few cents for little small pieces like that. And then you can custom build your figure. And it's really cool. So this guy here, again, he's got this really elaborate camo. He's got a little knife, cool guns. These guys here, I both have with the beret on and the goggles, but all that stuff's removable. Yeah, just really great stuff. Now, this is an amazing line, and they're still going strong. They have a ton of fans. Now, if I were to make my list today, I don't think these guys would make my list. Now, that's not a knock on the figures. They're amazing quality. They're on par with Hasbro's G.I. Joes. And since I have Frostbite handy still, let me just bring Frostbite in here. And you can see how well he displays. How well he displays with the G.I. Joes. Like, you could totally intermingle these two lines. So yeah, it's a great way to expand on your G.I. Joe line and sometimes even improve on some of your G.I. Joe figures. But anyway, the thing with me is I bought the first couple of waves of Marauder Task Force figures. I backed the first 3 Kickstarters they did. So it expanded to guys with suits, and it expanded to dogs, and it expanded to exosuits. And they made these guys in all kinds of different colors. I have yellow guys, orange guys, brown guys, gray guys. And then they did females. I've got all different females in all these different colors. So I've got a pretty big Marauder Task Force collection. But then I just kind of lost interest. I think the problem is they just didn't give any sort of background for these characters. Nobody has a name. There's no storyline. And some people might appreciate that because it just leaves it completely open to your imagination. But as opposed to, say, the Four Horsemen with their Mythic Legions line, they gave them a name and they gave them a backstory. They came up with a fake world of mythos where all these characters live. And, it gives you something to kind of latch on to and care about. With these guys here, if I was a kid and I played with them and I kind of gave them personalities, I could see myself really getting attached to a particular character. But, I'm an adult. I just put these guys on my shelf. And I just don't have that attachment to them. So after a while, when my toy budget was getting a little crunched, I thought, what? I'm just going to stop buying these Marauder Task Force figures. I think they're really cool. Objectively, I think they're amazing, but I just don't feel that attached to them. I'd rather get an inferior G.I. Joe figure than get a superior Marauder Task Force figure. Because I grew up with those G.I. Joes and I care about them, whereas these guys I just don't. So I've even considered maybe selling these guys off, which is not something I do very often. But I have a lot of them. I know there's a big fan base for them. I haven't bought any in years. And so yeah, for all those reasons, I don't think they would make my list if I were to make it now. At the very least, they wouldn't rank so high up here at number 6. But again, that is not a knock on the quality of the figures. If you think these guys look cool and this is up your alley, then by all means go check out the Marauder Gunrunners website and pick up some of these figures because it's a great site, great figures. Can't recommend them enough if it's your thing. But anyway, let's move on to my top 5. So we break into my top 5 with the Hobgoblin from Hasbro's Marvel Legends line. Now, a lot of people really like the Hobgoblin. He is one of Spider-Man's greatest villains. And this is not the look that most people think of when they think of the Hobgoblin. He usually has a much more classic look, which I'll show you here. So this is a kind of a classic Hobgoblin figure that came out a few years later. That's the look that he had when he first appeared, and it's basically the look he's carried on right into the present day. I really like this design for the Hobgoblin, except I think this figure really missed the mark. I hate this head sculpt on this Hobgoblin. They just recently re-released this figure in a little bit more brighter colors to match the animated show, but they kept the same head sculpt, which was hugely disappointing because the Hobgoblin's one of my favorite characters, And it really sucks when you wait years for a figure and then you get something like this that you're disappointed with. So when I heard they were going to re-release it, I thought they'd maybe redo the head, but nope, same head, just brighter yellow, and overall disappointing. So I'm still holding out hope that someday we will get a nice version of this Hobgoblin. But that's really neither here nor there, because this guy is a whole other character. So there was a time when Hobgoblin was dead. And so then this guy came along and took his place. And, that's not uncommon in comic books. Characters get replaced all the time. But what was kind of unique about this Hobgoblin is he was a known character who I really liked, and him taking a villain turn was kind of surprising. So this guy is Phil Urich, and he is the nephew of Ben Urich. And unless you're a hardcore comic fan, I know that probably doesn't mean a whole lot to any of you. But Ben Urich is an investigative reporter that works at the Daily Bugle. He's been in the supporting cast of both Spider-Man and Daredevil comic books for a long, long time. So sometime in the 90s, they introduced Ben's nephew, Phil. And Phil actually took up the mantle of the Green Goblin initially, because the Green Goblin was dead for a while too. And he became a heroic version of the Green Goblin, and he even got his own comic book series that only lasted about 13 issues, I think. But I collected that series. I really liked the Green Goblin, like the classic version, and it was cool to see this new take on the Green Goblin. The costume design was a little bit different, and I really came to like Phil Urich as a character. But then he gave up being the Green Goblin, and he was actually in another miniseries for a while called The Loners, which was about him and a bunch of other ex-teen superheroes, and they kind of had a support group, and I really liked him in that book as well. So again, I'm a Phil Urich fan. And then, one day in the Amazing Spider-Man comic books, Phil Urich decided to become a goblin again, but he became the Hobgoblin this time, and he became a villain. So it was kind of shocking that they took this character who had previously been established as a heroic character, and they made him a bad guy. But anyway, I really liked the design. So he's got a pretty unique look. Instead of the cape, he's got these bat wings. And he's still got the orange hood, the goblin face, but the face design is pretty unique. And at the time when he appeared in the comic book, the artist on the Amazing Spider-Man book was Humberto Ramos, and I love his style of artwork. He's got kind of almost like a graffiti style of artwork. It's very stylized, and I think it comes across in this figure really nicely. I'm really impressed when they're able to capture a particular artist's style. So even though this isn't really advertised as a Humberto Ramos Hobgoblin, that's clearly what he is. And so I just love this design. I was happy with this character. And, even if they had given us a perfect figure of the classic Hobgoblin, I would still be wanting this figure. And this is the kind of guy that I would think they'll never make him. He was only the Hobgoblin for a short period of time. I feel really lucky that we did get him. And I love it. Now, one thing I didn't like about this figure is that he was a Build-A-Figure, which means you had to buy 5 or 6 other figures to get all the parts to build him. So one figure came with his head, another one came with his arm, another one came with his leg. And that can be kind of annoying because you end up buying figures you don't want just to complete a Build-A-Figure that you do. But anyway, any ill will I had towards Hasbro about that has long since dissipated in the past 7 years. I don't even remember what figures I had to buy in order to build this guy. But I still think this guy holds up as a fantastic figure. Great sculpt. Really like the design. Cool stuff. In the number 4 spot, we have the G.I. Joe Marine Gung Ho. And this is from Hasbro's G.I. Joe line. Now, I know I said earlier when I was talking about Frostbite that Hasbro was not giving us many figures at this point in time. Which is true. I think we probably got more figures from the Collectors Club than, mainline Hasbro at the time, which is pretty crazy. But Hasbro was still giving us some pretty solid figures at the time. And this is a fantastic version of Gung Ho. He was released as part of what they were calling the G.I. Joe 50th anniversary line. It was the 50th anniversary of when the original 12-inch G.I. Joe was first released. Anyway, this guy's great. If you look at the vintage Gung Ho figure, he had these kind of bright, I don't know what you'd call it, turquoise, I guess, colored outfit. I don't know if that's very real world. I don't know if Marines ever wore that color. but his open vest with the tattoo on his chest, the mustache, the hat, he's just a great character. People love Gung-Ho. And when the modern line of G.I. Joes started in 2007, Gung-Ho was one of the very first figures that they put out. He came out in the initial 5-pack that introduced us to this new 4-inch scale. And this is the Gung-Ho we got. Now, it's not terrible. I guess for what it was at the time, it was kind of cool. You can see he's got that tattoo on his chest. He's got the kind of bluish vest and the camo pants. He's got the hat, the mustache. Everything you know about Gung-Ho is there. But this figure just is a little bit lacking. He's kind of bland. His arms are kind of small. He's just, he was an okay starting point for the modern era of G.I. Joes. But this is where the figures were by the time they, pretty much wrapped up the line. And I think you can see what a huge improvement this guy is. His sculpt is so much better. He's nice and muscular. He's taller. I really like this about the modern G.I. Joe line is that there was different sizes of characters. In the vintage line, all the figures were the same height. But here you've got really big guys. I love the head sculpt on this guy. It's got so much personality. That big mustache. Look at the size of that tattoo on his chest now. It's huge. Whoops. And of course, then he's got this massive gun. And even his bullets. He's got turquoise bullets to match his pants. A little silly, perhaps, but awesome. I just think this guy is great. I don't know what more you can really say about him. The Collectors Club repainted this figure the next year. And I was super stoked to get it a second time just because it's such a good quality figure. And I think, I'm a big fan of the classified 6-inch line that's coming out now. And I think most of them are some of the best versions of these characters we've ever gotten. But when it comes to Gung-Ho, I still think this version is superior. I think even the new version hasn't come close to matching how good this figure is. And since I'm talking about him, why don't I just grab him here? So here is the 6-inch Gung-Ho. So it's a good figure, but I like everything about the smaller version better. So they've actually repainted, or they're going to repaint that 6-inch Gung-Ho in the baby blue kind of turquoise colors. So we'll see how I feel about it then. But at least for now, this figure from 2015 is still by far the best Gung-Ho figure they've ever released. In the number 3 spot, I have Machine Man. So this is again from Hasbro's Marvel Legends line. And he might not look like much to some people. I get it. The figure's pretty simple. He's a pretty obscure character. But some of my favorite Marvel characters are these obscure characters. And I'm glad they didn't mess with the look of Machine Man very much. He's had some different looks over the years, some more modern, contemporary designs. And I'm glad they went with the classic design because it was designed by Jack Kirby. And, him and Stan Lee are basically the guys that created so many classic characters. I'm a huge fan of Jack Kirby's artwork. And I'm just so glad to get one of his classic characters in action figure form. And such an obscure one because, he designed characters like Captain America and stuff as well. But of course, I have lots of Captain America figures. But when he designed characters like Machine Man and the Devil Dinosaur and the Eternals, these are characters that I kind of thought I'll never see in action figure form. Now, we did get some of the Eternals a year or two ago, but they were all based on the movie looks. We still haven't got any Jack Kirby style Eternals. I'm sure I'm sure we will never get Devil Dinosaur because he would have to be huge. But anyway, we got Machine Man, and I absolutely love it. I like this metallic purple they went with. I think it looks really good. They could have went with a flatter purple, which would probably be more true to the comic books. But, he is supposed to be a machine man, and I'm sure they would have colored him a little more shiny if they had the means back when his comic was first being published. But yeah, I think the design-wise, they did not add a bunch of gadgets or useless stuff to him. He's still very smooth, very simple. And yeah, I love the colors. I love the design. I think, the body that they used for him, because this is one of those generic Marvel Legends torsos, that they've used for probably dozens of figures. But I think it's the perfect shape for Machine Man. You notice he's got these telescoping hands like Inspector Gadget would have. Those are optional. You can take those out and just put the hands at the end of his wrists if you want to. But that's a really fun feature. I'm really glad they gave that to him. I don't know what more to say about him other than I just think this is a fantastic figure. It's one of my favorite Marvel Legends of the whole line, and I have about 500 Marvel Legends now, and I think this guy would probably be in my top 5. So yeah, it's definitely a best of the year figure for me, even now. So in my number 2 spot, I have Devastator. So this is, again, a bit of a cheat, because this is, you could say, maybe 6 different characters in one, but not really. Devastator does stand alone. He's got his own personality. He is a combiner, so Devastator is the combined version of all 6 Constructicons. And this guy is huge. So he is part of the Combiner Wars series. But just to give you an idea of how big he is. So you know I had First Aid out here earlier. So First Aid is one of the characters that form the limbs to one of the other combiners. So he is the limb of Defensor. Now here is Defensor. Now you'll notice I have one of my Stunticons forming one of the legs instead of First Aid, because I like First Aid so much I didn't want him to be on my shelf as just a limb, so I replaced him with a Stunticon. But anyway, so here is Defensor. That's what the combined mode of 5 Protectobots looks like. But with the Constructicons, you can see Devastator. I don't even have room. My lamp is getting in the way and everything. Devastator just towers over him. This is a big figure. I don't know about his measurements. I'd say he's about 18 inches tall, maybe 20. I don't know. It's a big figure. So when you look at this guy and you think, wow, he's super impressive. Like, he towers over pretty much every other Transformer in my collection. Even with his crane, it goes up quite a bit higher. That probably makes him a full 24 inches tall or so. So as much as that kind of bumped him up really high on the list because he's such an impressive figure and he looks so cool, it also is probably what kept him from the number 1 spot, in that he's just awkward. Like, he stays together much better than the vintage Devastator that fell apart whenever you touched him, essentially. But I can't imagine trying to play with this guy. Like, he's so awkward to move. He's so tall that he tips over. And with a toy that's kind of just held together with a few pegs, combining all these other smaller robots, I just don't want him to fall over and break apart. So he feels delicate, and I get a little nervous touching him. The fact that I picked him up and brought him over to my desk for this video, this is the first time I think I moved this figure since I moved into this house. I typically avoid touching him, but he is just incredible. Like, he looks a lot like the vintage figure, but the vintage Devastator probably came up to this guy's waist. So he's like double the size of the vintage Devastator. But he's, the colors are fantastic. That bright Constructicon green with that purple on there. The face sculpt is amazing. Yeah, I love this guy. Another thing that kind of sucks about this guy is that he's made up of so many other cool figures that you almost have to buy 2 of them. The fact that I've had Devastator on my shelf for about the last 5 years untouched is kind of a bummer, because I've got all these great characters like Mixmaster and Scrapper and Long Haul and Scavenger. They're basically trapped to be nothing but limbs when they transform into pretty cool robots themselves. So anyway, great figure. Really like this guy. He's great as an individual, like as Devastator. He's great as the 6 individual characters. He makes for some great construction vehicles. It's a really solid toy, and it should be a real centerpiece of anybody's Transformer collection. So here is my number 1 figure for 2015. This is Bomb Strike from Hasbro's G.I. Joe line, and she was produced by the G.I. Joe Collectors Club as part of their figure subscription service, number 3. And I think this figure would definitely be on my list. Would she top my list? I don't know. I think Machine Man would probably give her a run for money. Otachi is great. But yeah, she's definitely a contender. She's a top 5 figure for me, for sure. I don't know if many others out there will feel the same. I think like she's a great figure. Like the head sculpt is really nice. You know, the sculpt throughout is really nice. Now most of these, you know, all the other parts to her are reused. I think like that torso is from a Scarlet. The whole figure might be Scarlet actually. I don't know. I think she might use some parts from Agent Helix. But the head is brand new, and the head is what matters. She's also got some cool accessories. She's got this suitcase, which I think has if you open it up, there's like a drone in there. Gun, backpack. So yeah, very cool. So why is she my favorite? Like, you might be thinking, sure, she's a decent looking figure, but what makes her number one? How is she better than Devastator? Well, the thing is, like, Devastator, as great as he was, he's kind of awkward to handle. He's, you know, you can't really play with him, I don't think. He's big. He falls apart if you move him too much. So when it comes to Bomb Strike, she's just a simple G.I. Joe figure. She's easy to play with. She's simple. And she's just got an interesting backstory. So the thing is with G.I. Joe, like, I love G.I. Joe in the 80s. And I love those characters, and I don't want them to totally recreate the wheel when they relaunch G.I. Joe. I don't want all new characters. Like, I want Snake Eyes, I want Duke. But I don't want them to just totally regurgitate the same thing I had when I was a kid, and that I had again when I was a teenager. You know, I don't want every 10 years for them to just sell me the exact same thing over and over and over again, which they often do, and which a lot of toy lines often do. And if they're going to do that, I think you need to do something to keep it fresh. You need to add some new characters every once in a while. Like with Masters of the Universe, they added Calyx and stuff. Just adding some of those new characters just made the line feel vibrant again. You're like, you get excited about new characters. And so with Bomb Strike here, she wasn't new in 2015, but where she comes from is in 2002, G.I. Joe kind of had a relaunch after it had been dormant for a few years. And that's what we call like Generation 2 or the new sculpt era of G.I. Joe. And so it was for the first time Hasbro came back with G.I. Joe figures, and they were not constructed with the rubber O-ring that was used to hold the vintage G.I. Joe figures together. Because those O-rings tend to erode over time, they wanted to come up with a new format that the G.I. Joes would last longer. And because of that, the construction was different. Often it was unsuccessful. They had big ball-jointed shoulders. Sometimes they had really long legs and short torsos. The new sculpt years gave us a lot of bad sculpts, but they gave us a lot of new concepts and a lot of new characters. And I really liked a lot of those characters. And even if the toy was a little wonky, the comic books that were coming out at the time by Devil's Due, they often made you really like those characters. They looked really cool in the comic book, even if the toy didn't look so great. And one of the most interesting things they introduced during those years was the Stahl family drama. So there was a new G.I. Joe character, newly created, called Barrel Roll, and his last name was Stahl. And then there was a new Cobra character. His last name was Stahl because they were brothers, and so that was Blackout. So you had brothers on opposite sides of the battle. And that was a unique concept to G.I. Joe. And then they gave us their younger sister, who was originally called Bombshell, but they changed her name to Bomb Strike. And I just really liked that storyline. The fact that they were giving us brand new characters, all three of those characters we had never seen before in the vintage line, and it added some new drama. I would have loved to have seen a cartoon of that era that really followed up on the Stahl family. They touched on it a little bit in the Devil's Due comic books, but unfortunately the Devil's Due lost the license to IDW, and they never really got to delve into it too deep. So, the storyline was largely left to our imagination, but Hasbro kind of planted the seeds to what I thought was a really great storyline, and I really was interested in these new characters. And then when the modern era started in 2007, they were really focusing on the old characters, the Dukes, the Snake Eyes, the Gung-Hos, and all that sort of stuff. And they did very few characters based on the 2002 line. So a lot of those new characters that we got, like the Neo Vipers or Sergeant Hacker or Dart, like a lot of new characters that were completely forgotten in the modern era and might be forgotten forever. I don't know if Hasbro's ever going to revisit those guys, because overall that era of G.I. Joe is not all that popular. So I was very happy that not only did we get the two brothers first, we get, I think, Barrel Roll in Figure Subscription Service number 1 and Blackout in number 2. And then we got Bomb Strike in number 3. She kind of completed the little family trio. And yeah, for all those reasons, I love this figure. I love this character. It was just fun. It made me excited about G.I. Joe again. It reminded me of a time in the early 2000s when G.I. Joe was like willing to take some risks and introduce some new stuff and not just rely on nostalgia. So there you go. I still think this figure holds up. I think it looks great. So yeah, Bomb Strike at number 1. Okay, so that was my top 15 action figures of 2015. I hope you enjoyed it, even though it's like 7 years too late. But, you know, I think it's kind of fun to go back and revisit this stuff. So if you enjoyed the video, please, you know, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you liked it and you want to see more of these, because I don't know if I'm going to be in a big rush to do my top 16 of 2016, but if I get a lot of feedback and a lot of comments, people saying like, yeah, we enjoyed this, we want to see that, I'll make sure to get to it a little bit quicker. Otherwise, I'm probably just going to go back to my usual stuff, and I'll do that 2016 one eventually. So, yeah, thank you very much for watching. As always, very much appreciated. I want to give a little special shout out to the guys over at the Nerd Out channel. Those are the guys that I started watching their YouTube video a while ago, and they kind of inspired me to start my own channel. And then they stopped putting out videos about a year and a half ago. Their channel just kind of went quiet. And, you know, so that's been kind of a bummer. And I was kind of hoping that maybe some of the people that watch that channel would maybe come over and find me. And I've always kind of thought of this as, you know, hopefully people that liked that can, you know, I'm a somewhat suitable replacement. Especially the episodes now that I have my buddy Chad on. I think that kind of conversational format, it kind of mimics the Nerd Out guys video. Anyway, I highly recommend you go check out their stuff if you haven't before. They've got some fun videos on there. Anyway, they posted a new video last night. So that was really cool to see some new content from those guys after such a long time. And hopefully they come back on the regular. So yeah, check them out, come back, check me out, and I'll see you next time. Ciao.